Hello and welcome to the 22nd episode of my Kerbal Space Program rebooted NASA series. Picking things up where I said I would last time. This video has been a long time coming. It's been a really hectic couple weeks. I've been sick. We've had family members in and out of the hospital, and then starting college level chemistry and calculus this semester has been quite an adjustment. But we're putting infrastructure in place to simplify and hopefully economize our Munar operations. This is what I've called the MSTV, Munar Surface Transit Vehicle. Its entire job is going to be to transition between the surface of the moon and the Munar Refueling Depot that I put up earlier many episodes ago and pretty much forgot about. Kind of a strange design for a rocket, but it's extra long, but I couldn't get one that... I originally had strap-on SRBs with a single tank, but in my sandbox mode I couldn't get that to fly reliably without the SRBs crashing into the center stack. So I just lengthened it and put a more powerful engine on it. Not quite as efficient as the SRBs were, but this thing is gonna be an investment as far as infrastructure goes. It's gonna be up there for a while. Had to confirm that our Munar Depot is actually on a retrograde Munar orbit, and because if I'd put this thing in to orbit around the moon and it was prograde, there's no way in the world I would have the Delta V to cancel that out and re-intercept it. So I have to make sure this thing comes in retrograde from the get-go, which means pretty much going for a free return trajectory. Which that's one of the advantages of I've been flying so many things free return. It really, I don't think I have anything actually in a prograde Munar orbit. Not really showing too much of the details of setting up a retrograde orbit or a free return trajectory. I keep meaning to explain that more in detail, and I'll probably get around to it eventually, but not this video. I was trying to get as close to a free return as possible, which really the normal use for free return trajectory is a safety factor. This thing's unmanned at the moment. I've designed pretty much all these new ships to fly unmanned if necessary, but this is really just to make sure I get an orbital insertion that I want, while also being able to ditch this transit stage onto the surface of the moon and have it crash instead of orbit forever. And this is where I start running into some issues. I've got monopropellant tanks on there. I have activated them. Actually, I'm not getting any RCS action out of it. I was trying to make some fine adjustments. For some reason, it is not recognizing that this thing has monopropellant on board. So that's going to make docking very interesting. However, that's an issue to deal with, a couple hours from now. So we're just going to press on and try to accomplish something here. And just decoupling it was enough to raise the peri-apps to 16,000. The earlier you do something in your orbit, the larger effect it's going to have. I think it's been said because of Earth's speed around the sun that if you were to catch an asteroid on an impact course early enough, you would pretty much just need 2 centimeters per second of delta V to cause a miss. However, if you're talking something super massive, just getting 2 meters a second of delta V is going to be quite an accomplishment. Cut out the transfer because that wasn't very interesting, but we insert into orbit correctly, and first thing we do is match our planes and then start trying to set up our orbital phases so we can get a good rendezvous. And that took several orbits around the moon. You can see the top left corner, it was 10 days launch time. And I'm adding this little indicator to show when I'm speeding things up in post-processing, so people don't get an unrealistic perspective as to my computer's capabilities. It's pretty powerful. In fact, I just bumped up the overclock to 4.7 gigahertz, and also got my second video card back. So it's a pretty beefy rig, but this game is pretty brutal on processors. And here, this is my very first attempt at trying to dock something without RCS. I'm going to figure this out later. I thought originally those roundified monopropellant tanks were KAS grabbable. They might be, and I might just be running into a bug because I seem to recall being able to pick them up. I got a manned crew out here to try and fix this, and it didn't quite happen. So I've got to come up with another solution to get RCS on board this. But the primary thing is that it be able to leave with a crew and land on the surface of the moon. It's gonna have to dock eventually, but right now it's just a matter of getting it parked so we can be ready to use it. All things considered, I think it went rather well. Not the prettiest rendezvous, but... And one of the advantages of having this thing attached now is now the fuel depot has a propulsion unit on board. So we can correct its orbital inclination to make it a more equatorial orbit. It's not perfect. I didn't get right on the ascending or descending node to fix my inclination, but close enough. But now that we have propulsion on board, we can readjust our orbit and put this thing into a 24-kilometer parking orbit, which make it more accessible for surface launches and also easier for landing. Require less delta V, and plus it's a more circular orbit, so it'll be easier to rendezvous with. That stage of the operation complete, we fire up the lights, make everything look pretty. And then we dodge back to Kerbin, where we are looking at Skylab, which is going to be another major part of this operation, but it's going to need some modifications. Right now it only has a single docking port, as does the Munar Fuel Depot. These stations are going to need to have more than one spaceship docked at them at a time, so I'm going to have to add a docking adapter so I can have multiple docking ports for multiple spacecraft. And that is the next part of our agenda. Taking a nice beauty look at Skylab. And this is the Munar, I don't have a fancy name for it, but it is a Munar Orbit Transit Vehicle. It's designed to transition between Skylab and the Munar Fuel Depot to deliver crew, and I was an idiot and didn't put any universal storage containers on this, so I'm going to have to figure out a solution so we can bring equipment back. I got in a little bit of a hurry. But I'd very much rather retrofit this existing equipment than try to build something new, because the whole plan of this was to be a little more economical. Being able to generate fuel on the surface of the moon, I'm hoping that really the only expense is going to be a Soyuz launch to Skylab, and then everything else can be handled as far as fuel and monopropellant by the Munar refinery. Which I really wasn't originally intending the Kethane refinery to be an all-purpose fuel generation station, but that's kind of the hand I've been dealt, or how things have worked out. I'm going to get this thing out of the way and slot that docking adapter in. But because of the difficulty in docking that without RCS, I decided to take kind of a creative path towards getting it attached. Instead of attaching the docking port adapter to the depot and then trying to bring this thing in without RCS, I've decided to capture it and then use both spacecraft's RCS systems together to kind of bring it in on one of the lateral docking ports, which is something I just came up on the spur of the moment. I was about to attach that to the fuel depot when I figured this would probably be the better way to go about it. It would kind of simplify maneuvers a little. Trying to figure out my camera angles here. And once again, this is capable of flying completely autonomously and bringing a crew of 7 if need be. The surface transit vehicle can only carry 3 at a time, but it can fly autonomously from the surface of the moon back to the depot to shuttle crew back and forth, which is rather convenient. And that is not, excuse me, that is not the cupola module that comes with KSP stock. You might notice it looks a little different. That is from the KSP X pack. It's a very old pack, the developer of which was actually hired by Squad, and so that part did make it into the game proper, but it's a little bit different. It doesn't have the cupola IVA. It's pretty much the same as the 3-person pod, the Mark 1-2, I believe. Just trying to get everything organized and aligned correctly. RCS isn't totally balanced on this thing, but it was close enough. Worked without too much difficulty. This is one of the more elaborate orbital operations I've done in the game. I only realize now that if I docked at if I'd captured the MSTV at a 45-degree angle, all the RCS ports would be thrusting in the same direction. But the fact that they're working indicates that if I can just get them fuel, then it should work just fine. And I'm thinking about, and this is going to look really ugly, but I'm starting to consider putting one of those 1.25 meter RCS tanks with a docking port on each side, and just kind of permanently attach it to the top of that thing. I am kind of concerned that would make things a bit more top-heavy than they should be, but unless I can figure out a way to get those roundified tanks moved or a new set attached, might be a lot of work in my future. Cut straight to the circularization after transferring the transit vehicle back to Kerbin orbit. We set our periaps at 77 kilometers, and we're going to set our apoaps at 100. That's going to put it in a slightly out-of-phase orbit from Skylab, letting us catch up to it. And you can see totally burned out that engine. Most of the final maneuvering was done with RCS. It wasn't that big of a deal because when I was within 200 meters of Skylab, I had 50 meters a second delta V left after bringing periaps up to 100. And when I was at 200 meters away from Skylab, we only had 56 meters a second difference in delta V. So I burned off the 50 meters a second that I had left in the engine, and then just finished the rest on RCS. Wasn't that major of a deal. But we go ahead and refuel everything. And because the Soyuz isn't going to need much in the way of fuel to get back, I'm going to transfer the majority of its remaining fuel over to Skylab, just to keep it tanked up and try and keep these transfer vehicle operations supported. And this is a modified Soyuz. You can see I've got the docking adapter intended for Skylab attached via a decoupler. That was because the decoupler is a little more rigid than just simply attaching with a docking port, and I really didn't want that thing flopping around too much. It still moves a little. You can kind of see it really well in 4 times time acceleration, but similar operations to the Munar Fuel Depot. We removed the docked spacecraft. Only this time, because the other ship is fully RCS capable, I went ahead and just docked this first. Because this is going to be a pioneering mission as far as new and novel techniques developed, we're sending the original trio out. Not too terribly interesting to watch docking with a space station, but this is just kind of all the pieces moving into place to support the Munar operations. I've already started on the grand journey across the surface of the moon in the Munar Expeditionary Vehicle. I'm still in the process of it. It's taken quite a while, and I've not been able to record as much as I wanted to. I wanted to see if I could get everything in a single take. However, I actually started running into hard drive issues because I forgot to delete the footage from this episode. So I lost quite a bit, and at this point I'm just going to capture the more interesting things, and obviously if I have a disastrous crash that scatters half the rover across the surface of the moon, that might be worth recording. I've got a Logitech G510 keyboard, so I've got a hotkey set up to start fraps in an emergency. If things start going very badly wrong, I will catch it on fraps. Finally complete this docking operation. Start refueling everything. Because once again, the Soyuz isn't going to need hardly any of its stuff, so go ahead and pilfer what it's got. A couple minutes later, we've got the crew transferred into the transit vehicle. All that communications equipment is necessary to make sure it can fly autonomously. I don't have perfect signal coverage around the moon, so I'm kind of worried I might potentially mess up, but that's a worry for the future. Make our rendezvous with the fuel depot. Fuel depot slash staging station. And that went well enough. And at this is the point where I tried to repair the MSTV. I honestly thought that tank was grabbable in KAS for some reason. I don't know if I'm misremembering or if I'm actually running into some pretty heinous bugs right now. My money's on me misremembering, but it is what it is. Get everybody transferred over. And it's not even showing monopropellant on the TAC fuel balancer. However, I did just... it shows that I've burnt it all up. That was from trying to dock. I forgot to disable those tanks, so it emptied them pretty quickly. And the MSTV is not going to reattach to the station itself, so just going to go ahead and transfer everybody over and get our landing underway. Unfortunately, the orientation doesn't want to quite cooperate with Jeb. So Bob turns it 90 degrees to give him a hand. And this is just pretty familiar Munar landing stuff right now. Set the periaps low, directly over your target. Stuff I've been doing since Apollo. But since this is the very first flight of the MSTV to the surface of the moon, just decided to show the whole thing. Obviously running 4 times time acceleration, because it's tedious enough already. Do the quick save, quick load thing to fix our UI. I've built 2 sets of lights into this thing. It's got landing lights and docking approach lights to illuminate any vessels that might be trying to rendezvous with that aren't equipped with their own lighting systems. Passing a little off plane from the base, but it's not too disastrous. unfortunately started the burn a little late, but this thing's got a ton of Delta V. It's very overbuilt as a lander because I designed it to also double as a rescue vehicle. That's where the advantage of its unmanned capabilities comes in. If I get a crew transferred, I can usually count on this thing being able to fly out and save them. Another bonus to that is I can be a little more particular in how I bring it down. Can make sure I get it very close, right on landing. See, 13 minutes worth of burn time at this current throttle setting. Trying to set up to get as close a landing as we can possibly pull off here. Really not a fan of hopping and skipping across the surface in little mini launches. Although this almost went pretty disastrously wrong as I was floating over towards the hab. I got a little cavalier there. Rotate it. At this point, it's time to start interfacing with the base proper. One of the advantages of having this, the MSTV and the new rover attached is now I've got 8 days worth of battery supply on this, which is enough to make it through a Munar night. I'm still going to add a RTG because, well, reasons, but mainly because the MSTV and the rover aren't going to be here at all times, and I'd very much like to have things off doing missions without worrying about the crew. Now, granted, the rovers don't have 8 days worth of battery supply to them, so I'm thinking of integrating an RTG onto each of the rovers, just so they have some power generation capability. One RTG isn't going to be enough to propel them indefinitely, but it will be enough to keep them powered overnight. Flip on the lights and Jeb activates his jetpack to go wrangle up the Munar Expeditionary Vehicle, which is exactly where the Sky Crane dropped it off, since it is not capable of unmanned driving. I do have one of those probe cores from the Cacti Space Telescope mod, which are actually KAS attachable, and so I've got one in one of the storage boxes on this thing, and I'm thinking about installing it to give this thing some limited autonomous capability. I'll have to put an antenna on it, but those are all KAS parts at this point, so but now that all the table settings out of the way, we can plug this thing in to make sure it stays charged. And then these guys are going to hang out for a Munar night before setting out on their grand adventure to Twin Craters. That being one biome that I have not visited in any way, shape, or form, and so the full range of scientific instruments on board the rover can be deployed for maximum effect. Get our last straggler out of there and onto the hab. And take one nice look at the base complex before settling in for the long Munar night. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode.